Right now, beneath your lawn, there is likely a slow-moving hydraulic force that's just exerting thousands of pounds of pressure against the foundation of your house.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it is strong enough to shatter underground plumbing and literally lift thousands of pounds of solid concrete. And the craziest part, you've probably been actively watering it.
Right. It really sounds like a premise for some disaster movie, but for homeowners dealing with, mature landscapes, it is an everyday creeping reality.
Yeah.
We tend to treat our yards like static paintings, but they are highly volatile biological systems.
Which is exactly why we are diving into this today. We've been going through this incredibly revealing stack of sources. It's a collection of arboriculture blogs and municipal service guides from El Monte Tree Service out in California.
Yeah, authored by a local specialist there named John Constantine.
Exactly. And the mission for our deep dive today is to really extract the crucial insights from this material so you know exactly how to manage these massive living structures safely. Because getting it wrong, well, it can cost you your home. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can even begin to talk about how to care for trees, we really have to understand the environmental forces that are actively trying to destroy them.
Yeah.
And conversely, how trees can end up destroying your property.
Yeah, the dynamic between a tree and its environment is just a relentless high-stakes negotiation. And the sources specifically highlight the unique stress of the Southern California climate cycle to illustrate this.
Right, because of the extremes.
Exactly. The weather patterns out there are defined by extreme whiplash fluctuations. You have this profound, punishing drought, followed suddenly by torrential atmospheric river-level rainfall.
I actually want to pause on that transition from drought to flood, because I think most of us assume a thirsty tree is just, happy to finally get some rain.
Sure, that's the logical assumption.
Right. But what actually happens to the soil and the root system during that sudden influx of water?
Well, that is where the structural danger really begins. During a severe drought, the soil becomes incredibly compacted and hard, like concrete, and the tree's root system responds by working overtime. It expands relentlessly in search of any microscopic drop of moisture.
Just pushing through anything in its way.
Exactly. The roots push into plumbing lines, under driveways, utilizing immense hydraulic pressure to just crack through obstacles.
Reading through these guides, that dynamic made me think of a specific analogy. A massive tree in your yard is basically a biological iceberg.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because the canopy and the trunk, the parts we admire, the parts we might try to trim, that's just the 10% visible above the water. But beneath the soil, there is this sprawling, aggressive network that is entirely invisible until the damage is already done.
What's fascinating here is the physical mechanism of what happens when the torrential rains finally arrive. All that hard, compacted soil we just talked about, it suddenly saturates.
It turns to mud.
Right. The microscopic pore spaces in the dirt fill with water, acting as a lubricant. The friction coefficient that was holding those massive roots firmly in the ground essentially drops to zero. The soil just turns into a soft slurry.
So the tree loses its anchor just as the storm rolls in?
Precisely.
No.
And this is where the above-ground and below-ground threats converge into a critical failure. If a tree has a dense, overgrown canopy, it catches the storm winds exactly like a giant canvas sail on a ship.
So you have a 10-ton sail catching gale force winds, anchored in what is essentially a mud puddle.
And that is the exact equation for catastrophic uprooting. The roots literally pull out of the lubricated soil, and the entire structure just comes crashing down.
Wow. And the sources also point out some very clear warning signs that a tree is losing the structural battle even before the storm hits, right?
Yeah, they do.
Things like a sudden leaning of the trunk or large suspended limbs hanging at unnatural angles. But one that really stood out to me was fungal growth.
Ah, yes.
If I see a mushroom growing on the bark of my oak tree, why is that an immediate red flag?
Because the mushroom or the shell fungus you see on the outside is just the fruiting body. The actual organism, the mycelium network, is deep inside the tree, and it's actively consuming the lignin and cellulose that give the wood its strength.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you see fungus on the exterior, it means the interior is decomposing. The tree is hollowing out. It's losing the structural density it requires to support thousands of pounds of heavy branches overhead.
Which is terrifying. And I think it completely sets up why we need to fundamentally rethink how we manage that canopy weight. If the stakes are this high, Managing a tree is clearly not about just grabbing some shears and hacking away at whatever branches annoy you.
Not at all. It is an exact science. In fact, the terminology alone is where a lot of property owners make their first critical error.
Yeah, the sources spent a lot of time delineating between two terms that I think most people, myself included, use completely interchangeably: trimming and pruning.
Right. People use them like they mean the same thing, but they are fundamentally different biological interventions.
Okay, so break that down for us.
Well, trimming is primarily about aesthetics and clearance. You are shaping the outer edges of the canopy, or simply removing twigs that are brushing against your roof tiles or blocking a sidewalk.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If trimming is basically giving the tree a cosmetic haircut, pruning is a precise surgical intervention.
Exactly.
You are targeting specific dead, disease, or structurally unsound branches, and the sources say this requires, and I quote, precise anatomical cuts. What does an anatomical cut actually mean in this context?
To understand that, we have to look at how trees deal with physical damage. Trees do not heal the way human beings do.
They don't.
No. If you cut your finger, your body regenerates new skin tissue to replace what was lost. Trees cannot regenerate damaged tissue. Instead, they utilize a mechanism called compartmentalization.
So they box the wound in.
Yes. Think of a submarine that has a hull breach.
Okay.
To stop the entire sub from flooding, heavy steel doors slam shut. They seal off that specific flooded compartment so the rest of the ship survives. Trees do this biologically.
That is wild.
Right. When a branch is cut, the tree actively plugs its own vascular tubes, the xylem, with structures called tyloses. Then, it floods the surrounding wood cells with antimicrobial chemicals like phenols.
Wow.
This creates a literal physical wall of hardened, decay-resistant wood to prevent fungus and pests from marching deeper into the trunk.
Okay, so if I'm an amateur and I just hack a thick branch off with a dull saw, leaving a jagged, torn stump, what happens to that submarine?
The tree cannot form that chemical bulkhead effectively. The jagged bark and uneven wood fibers prevent a clean seal. The compartment remains open, allowing moisture and rot to penetrate straight into the heartwood of the tree.
So the whole sub floods.
Exactly. An anatomical pruning cut is made at a very specific angle, just outside a swollen area at the base of the branch called the branch collar. That collar contains the specialized cells required to rapidly deploy those chemical walls.
So knowing how to cut is literally the difference between saving the tree and inviting a fatal infection. And when done correctly, this surgical pruning is what prevents that sailboat effect we talked about earlier. By thinning out specific inner branches, you allow the high winds to pass directly through the canopy rather than pushing against it. You reduce the drag coefficient.
It's aerodynamic engineering applied to a living organism.
Okay, so if pruning is this delicate surgical intervention that requires the tree to mobilize all these chemical defenses, does a tree's ability to survive that surgery change depending on the time of year?
Drastically.
Yeah.
Timing your cuts is just as critical as the technique itself. The arborists out in El Monte follow a rigid seasonal blueprint because a tree's biological state shifts completely depending on the temperature and daylight.
Let's walk through that biological clock. In winter, so roughly December through February, the sources say trees are largely dormant, they're asleep.
Right.
And this is identified as the ideal time to remove major dead branches and correct structural flaws.
Because the tree is dormant, its sap flow is incredibly low. Making a cut now means the tree won't bleed excessive sap, which, attracts winter foraging insects.
Oh, that makes sense.
Furthermore, without leaves, the entire architectural skeleton of the tree is visible. An arborist can easily spot crossing branches or weak joints that need intervention before the spring growth hides them.
Which brings us to spring, March through May. The sap is flowing, buds are breaking. The guides recommend light pruning now, specifically to shape younger trees and support the flowering and fruit production of things like California citrus.
Yeah, during spring, the tree is pushing energy upward from its roots. By selectively opening the canopy, you allow sunlight to penetrate the interior branches. And that directly stimulates those dormant buds to produce prolific flowers and fruit.
But then we hit summer, June through August, and this is where the sources throw up a massive warning sign.
A huge one.
In summer, the guides say pruning should be strictly prohibited unless there is an immediate safety hazard. And I have to admit, I struggle with the logic here.
Well, let's talk through it. What's your thought process?
Well, if a tree is completely leafed out, looking incredibly vibrant, and growing wildly in July, wouldn't that intuitively be the absolute best time to cut it back and control the chaos? It seems like it's at its strongest.
This raises an important question. and it is arguably the most dangerous misconception in landscaping.
Really?
Yeah. A tree in the peak of summer is not at its strongest. It is running a biological marathon in a desert. It is under immense continuous stress
From the heat.
from the mechanics of staying cool. A tree cools itself through transpiration. It is constantly pulling water up from the roots and evaporating it out through thousands of leaves.
Like sweating.
Exactly. That vascular system is under extreme negative pressure, like sucking a thick milkshake through a straw.
Okay, so if I climb up there with a saw and chop off a major leafy branch in 90-degree heat,
You are doing massive damage on two fronts. First, you instantly remove a huge chunk of the foliage that the tree relies on to produce food through photosynthesis.
right.
Second, you are severing those vascular tubes while they are under high tension. This can cause the water column to snap, introducing air bubbles into the tree's plumbing, a process called cavitation.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. And you force the tree to divert desperately needed energy away from heat survival to try and seal an open wound. It can send a mature tree into a spiral of irreversible decline.
You are essentially pulling a runner off the track mid-marathon and asking them to donate blood.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. You must respect the biological clock, waiting for the heat to break in the fall, which is when the focus shifts back to removing weak branches to prep the structure for the upcoming winter storms.
Okay, so we have incredibly complex vascular biology, we have the physics of wind drag, and we have the strict seasonal timing. But the sources reveal that attempting to handle this yourself brings in a completely different kind of science, specifically physics and law.
Oh yes, the guides are adamant about the severe dangers of do-it-yourself extractions.
Yeah.
The physical stakes of a removal are astronomical. When amateurs attempt to take down a massive damaged tree, they almost always underestimate the dynamic forces involved. It's not just about owning a chainsaw.
Right, I think a lot of people assume the tree just falls where you point it, like a lumberjack in a cartoon.
Right. Residential tree care requires surgical dismantling. Professionals use complex rigging systems, ropes, snatch blocks, and friction devices.
Because you can't just drop things on a house.
Exactly. If you cut a 1,000-pound branch and let it free fall just 10 feet before the rope catches it, the dynamic shock load multiplied by gravity will exert thousands of pounds of force on the rigging system.
So if a homeowner just ties a standard hardware store rope around a branch,
The rope will instantly snap, or the force will violently rip the anchor point entirely out of the tree, and suddenly you have a half-ton piece of timber swinging directly into your neighbor's living room, or tearing down a live high-voltage utility line.
and that physical disaster immediately triggers the legal and financial nightmare outlined in these municipal guides. In El Monte, and honestly in most major municipalities, trees are considered environmental community assets, not just personal firewood. If you cut down a protected tree without a city permit, the consequences are incredibly severe.
Oh, absolutely. Local ordinances are strictly enforced. Municipalities utilize satellite imagery and neighborhood reports to track unpermitted removals.
Satellite imagery, that's intense.
They do not mess around. The penalties usually include steep compounding fines, mandatory replacement fees that can reach into the tens of thousands of dollars, and even liens placed directly on your property title.
And the sources detail the ultimate financial trap. Let's say you skip the permit or you hire an unlicensed guy off the internet who brought his own chainsaw to save some cash, and he miscalculates that rigging shock load.
It happens all the time.
And the branch crashes through your roof. Naturally, you call your homeowner's insurance company to file a claim.
And that is when you discover the fine print of liability.
The insurance adjuster investigates, finds out the removal was unpermitted or performed by an uninsured amateur, and they will immediately deny your claim. They will void the coverage for that incident entirely.
Every time.
So what does this all mean? To me, doing major unpermitted tree work is exactly like deciding to knock down a load-bearing wall in your kitchen because you watched a 5-minute video online.
Yes.
If the ceiling caves in, the insurance company is going to look at the lack of structural permits, laugh, and leave you to pay for the destroyed house out of your own pocket.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes how we should view arboriculture entirely. Hiring a licensed professional is not a luxury landscaping expense. It is an essential risk management strategy.
Right.
And the sources emphasize that the professional must carry specific tree care, general liability, and workers' compensation insurance.
Because working with chainsaws 50 feet in the air around power lines is a totally different risk category than someone just mowing your lawn.
Exactly the point. If an amateur worker falls from a canopy on your property and they do not have specialized workers' comp insurance, you, the property owner, can be sued directly for their lifelong medical bills.
That is a staggering liability.
It really is. Licensed local arborists navigate the municipal codes, they secure the necessary environmental permits, they calculate the rigging physics, and most importantly, they shield the homeowner from catastrophic legal and financial exposure.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by looking past the tranquil aesthetic of our yards to recognize the invisible dangers, the aggressive hydraulic pressure of roots below, and the weather-stressed sail-like canopies above.
I've heard a lot, yeah.
We unpacked why saving a tree isn't about hacking branches, but rather making precise anatomical cuts that allow the tree to build chemical bulkheads, and timing those cuts to protect the tree's fragile vascular system.
It's a delicate balance.
And finally, we navigated the terrifying physics of rigging and the strict legal landscape of permits, proving that trying to cut corners with an amateur can literally cost you your home.
It is a powerful illustration that proactive, professional tree maintenance is an active, ongoing requirement for protecting both the biological health of your landscape and the financial security of your property.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought from the sources to mull over. Something that sits just outside the realm of compartmentalization and permits, but will change the way you look at your yard today.
Well, this is a good point.
When discussing those shattered underground plumbing pipes and the lifted, broken driveways, the El Monte arboriculture guides note that this massive destruction is often specifically the consequence of one foundational mistake, planting the wrong tree in the wrong location.
Yeah.
So, I want you to look out your window right now. Look at the beautiful, mature tree providing shade over your driveway. Did whoever planted that tree maybe 20 or 30 years ago actually understand its specific biology and root behavior?
Probably not.
Or, like that iceberg we talked about at the very beginning, are you unknowingly watering a root system that was fundamentally the wrong choice for your property's footprint silently spreading underground, just waiting to shatter your plumbing? Thanks for joining us in this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.